Quality Technical Advisory Committee meeting for April 22nd, 2021. At this time, Lisa Young will take a roll call to see if we have a quorum present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please respond. Nancy Allen, or Matthew Potzler.
Matthew Potzler here for Nancy Allen.
Stan Ballone.
Here.
Dave Berry.
Still have the what going on? Sorry.
Benjamin Bitter.
Here.
Thank you. Walter Bouchard. Janae Avila. Kim Butler.
Here.
Thank you. Derek Castaneda.
Here.
Thank you. Aaron Chavez. Beverly Chanowski.
Here.
Thank you. Tim Connor.
Here.
Thank you. Michael Denby. Scott DeBias.
Here.
Thank you. Robert Forrest. Elizabeth Foster.
Present.
Thank you. Christina Hoppes.
Here.
Thank you. Kevin Burke. Hondo Judd.
Here.
Thank you. Michelle Kamikawa. Spencer Camps. Martin Lucero. Peter Margoliner. Steve Burr.
I'm here.
Thank you. Amanda McGinnis. J.C. Porter. Danae Kressler. Mario Saldamondo.
Present.
Thank you. Megan Sheldon.
Megan Sheldon is present.
Thank you. Ramona Simpson.
Here.
Thank you. Susie Stevens.
Here.
Thank you. Edward Stillings.
Here.
Thank you. Steve Trussell. Kai Umeda.
Here.
Thank you. Robert Vandenacker. Kristen Watt.
Here.
Thank you. Michelle Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. In that case, the meeting of the MAG Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee is now called to order. All of our members are participating virtually. Please remember to mute when you're not speaking. If you're attending by phone only, press *6 to unmute. And just a reminder to our speakers and committee members to please not post or put substantive comments in the chat during committee meetings. At this time, we'll go to item number 2, which is the call to audience. An opportunity will be provided to members of the public to provide input through written comment to the Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee on items that are not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of MAG, or on items on the agenda for discussion but not for action. Members of the public are asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website at azmag.gov/comment and indicate for which meeting the comment is intended. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time of the meeting. Comments received prior to the deadline will be read aloud during the meeting. Comments must not exceed 3 minutes in length. A total of 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee requests an exception to this limit. Please note that comments received for agenda items posted for action will be read at the time the item is heard. MAG staff, did we receive any public comments?
Mr. Chair, we did not receive any comments.
Thank you. Item number 3 is approval of the March 25th, 2021 meeting minutes. If there are any questions, we'll take those now. If not, we need a motion to approve and a second.
This is Megan. I motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Thank you, Megan. Do we have a second?
This is Amanda McGinnis. I'll second the minutes.
Thank you, Amanda. At this time, we'll take a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please state your vote. Matthew Potzler.
Aye.
Thank you. Stan Balone.
Aye.
Thank you. Benjamin Bitter. Walter Bouchard. Kim Butler.
Aye.
Thank you. Derek Castaneda.
Aye.
Thank you. Aaron Chavez.
Aye.
Thank you. Beverly Chanowski.
Aye.
Thank you. Tim Connor.
Aye.
Thank you. Michael Denby.
Aye.
Thank you. Scott DeBias.
Aye.
Thank you. Robert Forrest. Elizabeth Foster.
Aye.
Thank you. Christina Hoppes.
Aye.
Thank you. Kevin Burke. Hondo Judd.
Aye.
Thank you. Michelle Kamikawa. Spencer Camps.
Here.
Thank you. Martin Lucero. Steve Burr.
Aye.
Thank you. Amanda McGinnis.
Aye.
Thank you. J.C. Porter. Danae Pressler. Mario Saldamondo.
Aye.
Thank you. Megan Sheldon.
Aye.
Thank you. Ramona Simpson.
Aye.
Thank you. Susie Stevens.
Aye.
Thank you. Steve Trussell.
Aye.
Thank you. Caillou Meta.
Aye.
Thank you. Robert Von den Akker.
Aye.
Thank you. Kristen Watt.
Aye.
Thank you. Michelle Wilson.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we have a unanimous vote.
Great, thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 4 then, which is the suggested list of measures to reduce PM10 particulate matter in the West Pinal County non-attainment area. And Matt Poppin from MAG will give that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Next slide, please. So just some background again on where things stand with the West Pinal County PM10 non-attainment area. As we know, on May 31st, 2012, EPA designated the West Pinal PM10 non-attainment area as a moderate area, effective July 2nd, 2012. In response to that, the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality prepared the 2015 West Pinal Moderate PM10 Non-Attainment Area State Implementation Plan and submitted it to EPA on December 21st, 2015. The attainment date for the moderate area was December 31st, 2018. On June 24th, 2020, EPA published a final rule to determine that the West Pinal County non-attainment area had failed to meet the attainment date by December 31st, 2018, and reclassified the area as a serious area. The effective date of that final rule was July 24th, 2020. And the determination that the area did not attain was based on monitoring data from 2016 through 2018. Next slide. Additionally, on January 8th, 2021, EPA published a proposed rule to approve in part and disapprove in part the 2015 West Pinal Moderate Area Plan prepared by ADEQ. And Also on February 26, 2021, EPA published a limited approval and limited disapproval of a revision to the plan regarding agricultural best management practices for the West Pinal County PM10 non-attainment area. Next slide. So I want to go through again the requirements for best available control measures and most stringent measures, as these really informed the draft suggested list of measures that we will be discussing. So the Clean Air Act requires that areas that are designated as serious non-attainment for PM10, they need to implement best available control measures, or BACM, on all significant sources of PM10 or PM10 precursor emissions. EPA defines a significant source as those sources that contribute more than 5 micrograms per cubic meter to a violation of the 24-hour PM10 standard. The PM10 standard is 150 micrograms per cubic meter, so the 5 micrograms is roughly 3% of that. BACM are defined as the maximum degree of emissions reduction from a particulate source, while also considering the technological and economic feasibility of implementing that measure. BACM are required to be implemented no later than 4 years after the reclassification to serious, the effective date of that, which for the West Pinal County non-attainment area is July 24th, 2024. Next slide. In addition to BACM, the non-attainment area is also going to need most stringent measures. And this is because to date, there have been multiple exceedances of the PM10 standard at the Hidden Valley Monitor in 2020, which make attainment of the standard impracticable by December 31st, 2022, which is the attainment date for the serious area. So the Clean Air Act allows EPA to extend that serious area attainment date for up to 5 years if the following requirements are met. If it is proven that attainment by December 31st, 2022 is impracticable, if all of the other plan requirements and commitments are met in the plan, and this is the important section for today, is that the plan includes the most stringent measures that are included in the plan of any state or are achieved in practice in any state and can be feasibly implemented in the area. Attainment as expeditiously as possible, no later than December 31st, 2027. So the maximum extension of the attainment date is a 5-year extension. Next slide. So MAG contracted with Trinity Consultants to perform analyses of best available control measures and most stringent measures for the West Pinal County serious PM10 non-attainment area. Candidate measures for all significant sources of PM10 were identified by comparing the existing measures that in the West Pinal County non-attainment area to measures in other serious PM10 non-attainment areas and PM10 maintenance areas that were formally seriously as identified by EPA. So that is a list of 10 areas. So the 10 areas that were compared were Coachella Valley in California, East Kern County in California, Imperial Valley, California, Maricopa County, Arizona, Owens Lake, California, Clark County, Nevada, the LA South Coast Air Basin, California, San Joaquin Valley, California, Wallula, Washington, and Washoe County, Nevada. Next slide, please. Significant sources of PM10 in the West Pinal County non-attainment area have been previously identified in the 2015 plan prepared by the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. Emissions of precursors to PM10, so these are, EPA defines these as ammonia, nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxide, and volatile organic compounds, are not considered as significant sources of PM10 at this time, based upon an analysis showing that only direct emissions of PM10 are significant in the non-attainment area. So the significant sources of PM10 then that were analyzed by Trinity Consultants are agriculture in terms of the production of crops, cleared areas, which are vacant areas, vacant lots, concentrated animal feeding operations for cattle, or known as CAFOs, construction sites, dairies, paved roads, unpaved lots, and unpaved roads. Next slide. Trinity Consultants completed their analysis of the BACM and MSM measures and included that analysis in a final report entitled Analyses of Best Available Control Measures and Most Stringent Measures for the West Pinal County Serious PM-10 Nonattainment Area. That report was provided to the committee on April 2nd, and as it was provided as well in your agenda packet. The final report contains 70 candidate BACM and MSM measures. The 70 measures were evaluated to determine the PM10 emission reductions and the technological and economic feasibility associated with implementation of each of those 70 measures. Next slide. The 70 candidate measures identified in the final report have been included in the draft suggested list of measures to reduce PM10 particulate matter in the West Pinal County Nonattainment area for consideration by the implementing entities. So each implementing entity then determines which measures are available and feasible for implementation by that entity. For the West Pinal County Nonattainment area, there are 2 entities that will be implementing the measures that are included in the suggested list. And that would be the Pinal County Air Quality Control District, and then those measures associated with agriculture. The implementing entity is the Governor's Agricultural Best Management Practices Committee. And again, specifically regarding measures that apply to agricultural sources, the Governor's Agricultural Best Management Practices Committee would be requested to evaluate the implementation of potential measures to further reduce PM10 emissions from agriculture. This committee was established by law in 1998 to develop an agricultural PM10 general permit. All right, next slide, please. I do want to spend some time and go through each of the 70 measures for you. What I've put together is just a short synopsis of each measure that I think will be helpful. There's certainly a lot more information on each measure that is included in the final report that you have in your packet, but I do think it would be helpful if I just go through each of the measures so you can get an understanding of what's included in each of these measures. So the first 25 measures in the list apply to construction sources. So the measure number 1 includes new requirements to minimize dust creation before or after disturbed surfaces have been created. So new requirements that may be included as a part of this measure would be pre-watering before work begins and the application of controls or stabilization techniques after work ceases. The second measure is to include new test methods to stabilize inactive disturbed areas. So these additional requirements beyond the drop ball test would be used to establish stabilization on disturbed areas. The third measure also is new test methods, but this is to stabilize active areas. And again, additional requirements beyond the drop ball test would be used to establish stabilization on disturbed areas. Next slide. Measure number 4 would include new requirements that strengthen the visible dust opacity standard. One of the new requirements may include not allowing visible emissions beyond the property line. Measure number 5 would include new requirements to tighten bulk material transport. A new requirement may include a freeboard height of 6 inches as opposed to the 3 that is currently in place. Measure number 6 would include new requirements that strengthen and expand trackout controls. And these new requirements may include the application of trackout controls to sites 2 acres or greater. Measure number 7 would include new requirements to address areas disturbed by vehicle staging areas and unpaved routes and parking areas. Some of the new requirements may include pre-stabilization of the area, additional speed limits, or the use of dust palliatives. Next slide, please. Measure number 8 would include new requirements to strengthen soil watering and dust palliative application. New requirements may include more frequent use of water under windy conditions. Measure number 9 would include new requirements to address specifically demolition and implosion activities. So new stabilization requirements may be specifically included for demolition and implosion when demolition or implosion occurs. So these next, as I'm going through these next few measures, these were ones that are related to very specific activities. So you'll see that. Measure 10 would be new requirements to address weed abatement. So there would be new requirements that may include the application of water before, during, and after disking to control weeds. Additionally, new requirements to address sandblasting and abrasive blasting on construction sites. These may include limiting the hours of blasting and the stabilization of soils adjacent to the blasting. Next slide, please. Measure 12 includes new requirements to address backfilling. Again, this is largely the use of a stabilization of that backfilling material prior and during and also after using with water or another type of stabilization activity. Measure number 13 would include new requirements that specifically address clearing and grubbing activities. Again, these new requirements would be focused on the stabilization of the soil during and after clearing and grubbing. Measure 14 includes new requirements to address cleaning of foundation and slab forms used on construction sites. New requirements may include the use of water, sweeping, and vacuums to clean the forms. Measure number 15 includes new requirements to address crushing operations on construction sites. The new requirements may include the stabilization of the crushing material before, during, and after crushing. Next slide, please. Measure number 16 addresses cut and fill activities. The new requirements may include pre-watering of soils prior to site grade preparation. Measure number 17 includes new requirements to address screening operations, similar to crushing. New requirements may include the stabilization of the screening material before, during, and after screening. Measure number 18 includes new requirements to address trenching operations. New requirements may include the pre-soaking of soils prior to trenching activities. And measure number 19 includes new requirements to address paving and subgrade operations. New requirements may include the stabilization of soils adjacent to the paving activities. Next slide, please. Measure 20 is including new requirements for dust control plans. New requirements may include a project site drawing and the inclusion of soil designations for sites 1 acre or larger. Hello, Amanda. I see your question there, and we will have time for questions towards the end of the presentation. So I'll make sure that I will make time for that. Thank you. Measure number 21 is including new record-keeping requirements, and these new requirements may include the provision of dust control records as soon as possible, but no later than 48 hours after request. Measure 22 includes new dust control coordinator requirements. New requirements may include additional record-keeping requirements for a dust control coordinator. Measure number 23 is to include new dust control monitoring and violation requirements, and new requirements may include the use of a surety bond. Next slide, please. These are the last two construction measures. Measure number 24 is include new signage requirements. New requirements may include specific signage requirements for trenching and demolition projects. And then lastly, measure number 25 is to include new dust control training requirements. New requirements may include the requirement of a trained dust control coordinator on sites 5 acres or larger. All right, next slide, please. So these next set of measures apply to cleared areas or vacant areas. So the term cleared area largely refers to an area where the native vegetation has been pretty much removed. So we're largely talking about vacant lots or areas that are vacant that do not have vegetation associated with them. So measure number 26 would include a new requirement to lower the threshold for vacant lot regulations from 1 acre to 1/10 of an acre. Measure number 27 would include new requirements that strengthen vehicle use requirements on vacant lots. New requirements may include the application of surface gravel or stabilizer to vacant lots. Measure 28 is to include new requirements that strengthen vacant lot regulations. New requirements may include additional regulations for lots that are disturbed for more than 15 days. Next slide, please. Measure 29 is to include new requirements for mitigation plans for cleared areas over 10,000 acres in size. The new requirement may include the submittal of a dust mitigation plan. Measure number 30 would be to include new requirements for weed abatement and trash removal on cleared areas. New requirements may include pre-watering of surface before activity begins. Next slide, please. Measures number 31 through 37 in the draft suggested list apply to dairies. So measure 31 is a new requirement to lower the threshold of dairy regulations to 50 animals. I believe the current is 500 or 150. Measures 32 through 37 are largely the same measure, which is to increase the number of fugitive dust best management practices from 1 to 2 for each of these specific operational categories. So the new requirement is the same, we just have them listed out for each of these operational categories. So the new requirement would be going from 1 BMP to 2 BMPs for the areas of arenas, corrals, and pens, for when waste handling and transport of the waste occurs, for all unpaved access connections at dairies, for all unpaved roads and feed lanes at dairies, and for all unpaved equipment traffic areas at dairies. Next slide, please. Measures 38 through 44 apply to confined animal feeding operations for cattle. Measure number 38 would be to include a new requirement to lower the threshold for cattle regulations to 50 animals. And similar to dairies, measures 39 through 44 include new requirements to increase the number of fugitive dust best management practices from 1 to 2 for each operational category. So again, we have the areas of arenas, corrals, and pens, waste handling, transport, unpaved access connections, unpaved roads, and feed lanes. Next slide, please. Measures number 45 through 51 now apply to the growing of crops. So measure number 45 would include requirements to increase the number of BMPs from 2 to 3 for cropland areas. Cropland areas are those areas where crops are actively growing, so the fields themselves. Measure number 46 would include requirements to strengthen use of BMPs on non-cropland areas. So these are vehicle storage traffic areas. New requirements may include more frequent stabilization of the soils of non-cropland areas. Measure number 47 is to include requirements to increase the number of BMPs from 1 to 2 for commercial farm roads. And measure number 48 would be to include requirements for the stabilization of off-field bulk material storage. So this is material that may be generated on site, but it's not crops. If there was movement of dirt or some other things, that would be considered off-field bulk material. So new requirements may include the covering and stabilization of stored bulk materials. Next slide. Measure number 49 is to include new requirements for the handling and transport of those off-field bulk materials. New requirements may include limiting transport speeds and also the tarping of transport vehicles. Measure number 50 is to include requirements to increase the number of BMPs for agricultural earth moving operations from 1 to 2. And then measure number 51 is to include requirements to require the use of BMPs to control windblown dust from crop areas on all days, not just the high wind, high risk days. So the BMP would apply on all days. Next slide, please. Measures number 52 through 57 apply to unpaved roads. So measure number 52 would expand the definition of unpaved roads to explicitly include alleys. Measure number 53 would be a new requirement to lower the threshold for when unpaved road regulations would be triggered from the current of 150 average daily trips to 26 average daily trips. Measure number 54 would include new specific requirements for the stabilization of unpaved roads with 26 or more average daily trips. New requirements may include use of an improved fugitive dust plan. Next slide. Measure number 55 is to include new requirements to increase the stringency of unpaved road paving and stabilizing controls. New requirements may include new speed limits and additional paving. Measure number 56 is to include new reporting and record-keeping requirements for unpaved roads. New requirements may include a summary of actions taken to prevent or mitigate PM10 emissions on unpaved roads within the records. And then measure number 57 is to include new requirements to address dust mitigation for an off-road event competition. New requirements may include stabilizing unpaved roads associated with the off-road event. Next slide, please. Measures number 58 through 60 apply to unpaved parking lots. Measure number 58 would be to include a new requirement for 0% opacity at the property line. Measure number 59 would be to include new requirements to increase the stringency of fugitive dust controls on unpaved parking lots. New requirements may include the use of additional stabilization techniques and trackout controls. Measure number 60 is to include new specific requirements for hydrographic lands. Hydrographic lands are those lands that are generally considered to be within an area where an old river wash or an area that kind of lands within a river wash area. New requirements may include the prohibition of unpaved parking lots in those hydrographic lands. Next slide, please. The last 10 measures apply to paving to paved roads. So measure number 61 includes new requirements to stabilize the unpaved shoulders adjacent to existing paved roads. New requirements may include a paving of unpaved shoulders. Measure number 62 includes new requirements to pave or stabilize shoulders and medians on new and modified paved roads. And new requirements may include shoulder paving and or curbing. Measure number 63 is to include a new requirement for the immediate cleanup of trackout on public paved access areas. The new requirement may include the immediate cleanup of trackout over 25 feet in length. Next slide, please. Measure number 64 is to include new requirements that only PM10 certified street sweepers be used to clean trackout deposits on paved roads from any source. Measure number 65 is to include new requirements for trackout controls for large operations in windy conditions. New requirements may include tarping and freeboard height restrictions. Measures number 66 and 67 were very similar. One applies to freeways, one applies to arterial streets. So the new requirement would be the requirements for the use of PM10 certified street sweepers on freeways and arterials. New requirements may include the use of certified street sweepers by government agencies for freeways and arterials. Measure number 68 includes new requirements to use wetted brushes and blowers on sweepers used for parking lots and only vacuum type cleaning for pavement crack cleaning. So here, we're talking about the maintenance of parking lots and streets. New requirements may require the use of water or vacuums while performing cleaning. Next slide, please. The last two measures. Measure number 69 is to include new requirements for paved roads and shoulders on non-conforming roads. New requirements may include the reconstruction of paved roads and shoulders to meet conforming standards. And lastly, measure number 70 is to include new reporting and record-keeping requirements to include street sweeping and trackout compliance. New requirements may include daily self-inspection records of sweeping frequency and trackout cleanup. Next slide, please. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, an action is requested with this item, and the action would be to recommend approval of the draft suggested list of measures to reduce PM-10 particulate matter in the West Pinal County Nonattainment area to the management committee. I know there are some questions, so at this time, I will be available for questions.
Thanks, Matt. I know there were a couple of questions on the chat, so if you wanted to review those and answer those, and then we can open it up for any other questions.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chairman, if those who have questions on the chat, if they could actually say those for those who don't have access to the chat, so we could get those recorded, and so then I could respond to them.
That would be great. Thank you. First one was from Amanda McGinnis.
Good afternoon, Matt. Thank you for the presentation. I'm kind of scratching my head. I went back and pulled up the meeting information from March, and I noticed in the emissions inventory pie chart that construction was 2.9% out of the 2017 emissions inventory that you started with. And yet we have 25 measures. It seems a little inequitable to me, first of all, when I'm looking at it. I'm wondering if this is because the current conditions that Pinal County has, Mike and Scott, that are working through, don't have that strict of a compliance down there, and they're beefing up their rules. But I'm really shocked to have that many measures on one industry when the percentage is at 2.9%. I went down, we only have 5 measures for your highest unpaved road depths, which was 72% of the inventory. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your questions, Amanda. There are a couple responses. So as you know, we are required to do BACM and MSM for all significant sources. And so as we had discussed at our March meeting, the inventory that was prepared for that meeting was a non-attainment area-wide inventory. There will also be inventories that will be prepared for the specific monitors that are violating the standard. And so there will be different emissions contributions from different sources at each of those monitors that will look, so the percentages could look different depending on which monitor we're looking at. But in terms of the number of measures, again, we were required for any significant source, and construction was identified as one of those significant sources. The BACM and MSM requirements just require us to look at everything that is in place. So the number of measures are just a result of what is currently available in those other serious area non-attainment areas. With construction, we also made the choice to specifically list out all of those individual categories. When we went through demolition and weed clearing, the measure itself is pretty, the controls applied to those would be pretty similar, but just to make it clear where those came from, we listed out each of those separately. So that there's some of the reasons why the numbers of measures for each of the sources are what they are. It's based on a comparison of what exists out there currently. And so we included everything that was stricter than what we have. So if there was any measure out there in those 10 areas that was stricter, it's included in this report.
So Matt, I have one other question, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay, before he moves forward. And that is just to wrap my brain around it. What is the percentage number then for construction to have been categorized as a significant source?
Yeah, so the significance level, as we mentioned earlier, is any source that contributes 5 micrograms or higher to a PM10 exceedance. So we have not finished our selection of design days for each of the violating monitors that we will be doing attainment demonstrations for, but any source that contributes 5 micrograms or higher is considered a significant source. And that's roughly, again, when you look at it out of 150, that's roughly 3%, but we are also looking at, concentrations in the 200s for our design days. So the percentage would be much lower. But again, it will depend on the specific design days that are chosen, both under windy conditions and under low wind conditions. So it'll vary. The contributions from the emission sources will vary on each of those days. But the regulation is any source that would contribute 5 micrograms or higher is considered a significant source.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Hi, Matt. This is Ramona Simpson, town of Queen Creek. So sorry, I had to step away for a second. And I came back right as you were saying there were possibly some stricter measures than the Maricopa County that we already have measures. Is that true, that there were some more stricter measures in the West Pinal?
So the report that, thank you, Ramona. The report that we sent out only includes measures where the existing measurements, or the existing measures in West Pinal were less stringent. So if West Pinal County had a more stringent measure for one of these sources or subcategories within the source, it was not included in that report. So yes, when we, during our January meeting, I went through some of those comparison documents with the committee where I showed how the consultant had took a particular activity within a significant source, and we compared it with what existed in Clark County and Maricopa County and Imperial Valley and San Joaquin. And there are some cases where the regulations that are in place in West Pinal are stricter than what were or equivalent to what exists in those other areas. So when that is the case, those we did not highlight those in that report. We only included measures where the other areas were stricter. When we actually do our complete state implementation plan submittal and our chapter on best available control measures and most stringent measures, we will include those areas where the measures that are in place in West Pinal County are stricter than others or equivalent to. Those will be shown as part of our overall analysis. But in terms of this suggested list, we did not include those measures.
Okay, because we and Queen Creek straddle both Maricopa and Pinal. I'm sure other like construction, they're everywhere. So we were planning on modeling. Well, we do it right now, right? We don't differentiate our dust control plan and measures, whether or not we're in Maricopa or we're in Pinal. We have kept it at the higher level Maricopa activity and control measure. So I was planning on keeping that the same, but I wasn't sure. I think we'll have to take a look at that to see if there are stricter things, because now that puts me upside down, right? So because we have we have street staff and ground staff and others that we don't want to say you do this when you're in Maricopa and you do this when you're in Pinal. That gets very confusing. We just want to keep it at the highest measure available to do. So I just want to make sure that when we're looking at this, that we're not trying to, trying to do something more in one area than the other, and to keep it consistent, because we do straddle both of those counties. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I understand the thinking you have there. I think you would just need to evaluate what is ultimately included as a committed measure in the plan, and to see if it does end up being stricter than what possibly might exist in the Maricopa County PM-10 non-attainment area. And I do just want to point out again that this is a draft suggested list of measures. So this will, if this ends up being recommended for approval to the management committee, and then from the management committee to regional council, and then regional council approval, there will be this time where the implementing entities, which in this case are the Pinal County Air Quality Control District and the Governor's Agricultural Best Management Practice Committee, they will evaluate these 70 measures for technological and economic feasibility, and as well for those two feasibility. And then they will provide commitments back to us based upon this suggested list. So right now, this is just a suggested list, so we don't know what commitments will be received once the suggested list goes out. So that, at that point, it would make sense to evaluate, okay, here are the committed measures that are in the plan, to see if any of those are stricter than what is in practice on the Maricopa County side.
Yeah, I think just because of, where we are, it's going to be hard, because of course, when it goes up to the next level, it ends up being at town manager and mayor level. They're going to ask me, well, what has changed for the town of Queen Creek? I'm sure everyone will have this same question. What am I agreeing to that's going to make an additional commitment to our organization or municipality? And that's hard for me to make without knowing what those, if we're recommending, what are we recommending that would be higher or more stringent than Maricopa County? That's my difficulty right there.
Okay. Yeah, and if you have specific areas, we can provide some additional comparison work that was done. If you have specific questions or specific areas you would like more information on, that is something we can provide to help you differentiate between what is in Maricopa County currently, because Maricopa County was one of the areas that was compared as part of this analysis. So that is something that could be helpful.
This is Spencer Camps with the Home Builders Association from Central Arizona. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Spencer.
I just had a couple questions. So, first of all, I want to, you touched on it in your previous comments, I think, but I wanted to clarify the effect of passing these control measures would obviously move them through the MAG process, but and then ultimately they would be adopted by the county in the construction circumstances. As what I'm focused on, it would be the county essentially adopting them. But what is the effect that stakeholders would have if they deemed a measure inappropriate for the Pinal County AMA based on the guidelines you kind of touched on, the economic and technical reasons? So what is the effect if a measure wasn't actually adopted down at the county?
So if part of the process is that this suggested list goes out, and then the county, that if we're going to focus on construction, if Pinal County Air Quality District determines that one or some of the measures are infeasible for either technological and or economic reasons, they would be required to provide reasoned justification for why that is. And so they would include that and say, these are the reasons why this measure is infeasible. And so that reasoning, that reason justification would be included as part of the plan submittal then for why that measure was not committed to.
Okay, well, I'm just going to say, I think, we spent many years in Maricopa County developing a plan that complies with the Clean Air Act. And that was a very, very difficult process. And quite honestly, I don't know how many people are on this call that lived through that. Unfortunately, I did. We missed the mark for quite a long time. And I'm getting that feeling from this list of measures based on the inventory that I've seen that exists out in Pinal County. We are taking, in my opinion, a Maricopa County plan that was developed on a completely different emissions inventory and plopping it down on Pinal County with no real thought from my perspective. To your earlier comments, you said that each monitor may have a different inventory. So we don't have any assurances this plan will actually work, but we in turn need to justify as we go through the stakeholder process in Pinal County whether a measure should be adopted or not, and provide justification as to why. And that I think we're jumping the gun here a little bit. I really do. You're essentially developing the compliance plan for Pinal County air quality right today.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Spencer. Really the driving, factor behind this list of measures are those two requirements that are in the Clean Air Act. Best available control measures and most stringent measures. We have to do best available control measures because we're a serious area. So that requires this, evaluation of what exists out there and then comparing it to what currently exists in the West Pinal County non-attainment area.
No, I understand. We're complying with the Clean Air Act. That's the only focus. It's not compliance and air quality in Pinal County. I understand. I really do. I don't hold that against you or the process from that standpoint. We have to adopt these measures. Ultimately we have to have the most stringent measures. So I understand that, but I want to be on record that when we do not comply in Pinal County, this is why. It's because there is no focus on the inventory. There is no focus on the depth of problem down there as it relates to air quality. And we are jumping the gun in an effort to comply with the process, not air quality, but the process of the Clean Air Act. And that's my objection.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is Steve Trussell, the Arizona Rock Products Association. While I recognize, I don't know how some of these will affect my respective industry, I have the same concerns that Mr. Camps has in regard to the inventory. I know that when we went through this, and we recognize everyone has to play a part. Please don't misunderstand. And I understand, his concerns. I understand what, MAG is trying to do wholeheartedly. But I think we have to be very careful when we are looking at these measures at cost of compliance. I think we have to look at what we really stand to gain from that and so forth. Just having a list of measures is not going to get it done. I think we have to, we learned the hard way in Maricopa County. It was a very difficult process. We found out, that the things that we were told, hey, all you need to do is X. I'll give you an example. Hey, you need to check your soil moisture content on your conveyor belts. Well, how are we supposed to do that? We'll just reach over and do that on a moving conveyor belt, which is, patently illegal according to the Mine Safety and Health Administration and OSHA. So these are, that's just one of many examples. And then all of the costs incurred by then having to go make those showings of soil moisture that took folks out of the QA/QC realm, and they were doing these soil moisture tests. Then we were, throwing unbelievable amounts of water on the ground in a state that is challenged with water quantity issues. So I could go on for a long time, but I couldn't agree more that we really need to take a deeper dive into this and make sure that what we're contemplating doing will actually have the intended effect that we're looking for.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, in that case, our action item is to recommend approval of the draft suggested list of measures to reduce PM-10 particulate matter in West Pinal County Nonattainment area to the MAG Management Committee. Would anyone like to bring that motion forward?
This is Steve Burr with DEQ. I so move.
Thank you, Steve. Do we have a second?
This is Scott Tobias with Pinal County. I'll second that.
Thank you, Scott. We'll now take a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please state your vote. Aye for yes, no for opposed, and abstain if you wish to decline from voting. Matthew Potzler,
Aye.
Stan Ballone,
Aye.
Dave Barry, Benjamin Bitter, Janae Avila,
Aye.
Kim Butler,
Aye.
Derek Castaneda,
Aye.
thank you. Aaron Chavez,
Aye.
thank you. Beverly Chanowski, Beverly Chanowski, Tim Connor,
Aye.
thank you. Michael Denby, Scott Tobias,
Aye.
thank you. Elizabeth Foster,
Aye.
thank you. Christina Hoppes, Kevin Burke, Hondo Judd,
Aye.
thank you. Spencer Camps,
No.
thank you. Martin Lucero, Steve Burr,
Aye.
thank you. Amanda McGinnis,
No.
thank you. Danae Pressler.
Sorry,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
this is Martin Lucero. Sorry, I tried to get off of mute earlier. My vote was nay.
Thank you. Danae Pressler.
Aye.
Thank you. Mario Saldamondo.
Aye.
Thank you. Megan Sheldon.
Aye.
Thank you. John Sherrill.
Aye.
Thank you. Ramona Simpson.
No.
Thank you. Susie Stevens.
No.
Thank you. Steve Trussell.
No.
Thank you. Kai Umeda.
Abstain.
Thank you. Robert Von Den Akker.
No.
Thank you. Kristen Watt. Michelle Wilson.
Abstain.
Thank you. One moment, please. Mr. Chair, we have 15 yeas, 7 noes, and 2 abstentions.
All right, thank you. Item number 5 is an update on the 2022 Serious Area Particulate Plan for the West Pinal County Non-Attainment Area. Matt Poppin will give that presentation.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Sorry, I was on mute there for a minute.
No problem.
All right. Thank you again, members of the committee. I want to provide an update on the continued planning activities for the Serious Area Plan for the West Pinal County Non-Attainment Area. Next slide, please. So I want to start off again with an emissions inventory update. As we had mentioned in the past, EPA recommended selecting a base year between 2016 through 28 for the Serious Area Non-Attainment Area. So 2017 was selected as the base year. Work is ongoing to develop this base year emissions inventory with inputs developed by ADEQ, Pinal County, and Maricopa Association of Governments. And based on the information we have received, a preliminary inventory has been developed for the entire non-attainment area. Next slide, please. So I shared this pie chart at our last meeting, and I received a request to break out the contribution of dust from unpaved roads into their subcategories. So the only difference between this pie chart and the one that was displayed in last committee's meeting is that the unpaved road dust has been split up into 4 categories. So we have unpaved road from public roads is at 19% of the inventory, private roads is at 30%, agricultural roads is at 21%, and trails is at 1.8%. Next slide, please. Also wanted to update this table that compares the draft 2017 base year emissions to emissions that were developed for the ADEQ moderate area plan. And the ADEQ moderate area plan had a 2008 base year and a 2018 attainment year. One change we have made to this table from our last committee meeting is we have compared the 2017 base year emissions to the 2008 base year emissions in terms of the percentage increase or decrease. And this shows that largely for most emission categories, there has been a reduction in emissions. in that 2017 base year when compared to the 2008 base year developed in the ADEQ plan and the 2018 attainment year developed in that ADEQ plan. I have also included those broken out categories of unpaved road dust for public, private, agricultural, and trails. So those new categories are now in this table as well. Next slide, please. One of the other things I wanted to provide the committee some more detailed information on is the role of PM10 precursor pollutants in the non-attainment area. EPA has identified 4 precursor pollutants that contribute to the formation of particulate matter. You have ammonia, nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxide, and volatile organic compounds. So as part of the plan, EPA requires that the plan address the role of precursor pollutants in determining whether or not they contribute to PM10 exceedances in the non-attainment area. EPA has stated that a state must include direct particulate matter emissions and these 4 precursors and emissions inventories, and must control emissions from sources of all of these pollutants unless the state demonstrates to EPA's satisfaction that control of one or more of these pollutants is not needed for expeditious attainment of the NAAQS in the non-attainment area at issue. Next slide, please. So the 4 precursors are involved in what's known as secondary formation of particulate matter. This is where the 4 precursors are in a gas phase in the atmosphere, and they undergo chemical reactions to ultimately form particulate matter. Ammonia, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur dioxide form inorganic particulates, namely nitrate, sulfates, and ammonium. And VOCs form secondary organic aerosols that are usually represented as organic carbon. I want to make a point that most of that secondary particulate matter is formed in the fine fraction of PM10, so this is particles PM2.5 or less. So if you look at the graphic there, you can see where ammonia and organics and black carbon and some other secondary, what we would call these precursor pollutants, are formed at either the ultrafine particle level or the fine particle level. And then for the most part, the coarse particles, those particles larger than PM2.5 are directly emitted, although some secondary particulate can form in the coarse portion of PM10. Next slide. So MAC has prepared a weighted evidence analysis that precursor pollutants do not significantly contribute to exceedances of the PM10 standard in the West Pinal County non-attainment area. And we use 3 data sources for this analysis. The first one is co-located PM2.5, PM10 ratios and their concentrations on exceedance days in the non-attainment area. There is also a chemical characterization study of coarse and fine fraction particulate matter in the non-attainment area on PM10 exceedance days, and then also photochemical modeling of the impact of these precursors on PM2.5 concentration in the non-attainment area was done. Next slide, please. So in terms of looking at co-located PM2.5 and PM10 ratio, there are 2 monitors in the non-attainment area that have co-located PM2.5 and PM10 data, the Casa Grande downtown monitor and the Hidden Valley monitor. So based upon PM10 exceedance day data from 2016 through 2020, we looked at the PM2.5, PM10 ratios, and those are indicative of direct primary fugitive dust sources. So ratios between 0.1 and 0.2 normally are reflective of fugitive dust sources and not the ratios that would be formed by the secondary precursor pollutants. You can see that the average at the Casa Grande monitor is 0.112, and the average at the Hidden Valley monitor is 0.143. Only one of the 13 exceedance days at the Casa Grande monitor had ratios above 0.2, excuse me, and only 22 of the 166 days at the Hidden Valley monitor had ratios above 2. Next slide, please. So when we look at those 22 exceedance days where the Hidden Valley monitor had ratios above 2, there is great variation between the PM2.5 and PM10 concentrations at the Hidden Valley monitor as compared to the Casa Grande monitor. So this indicates that local primary sources of PM10 are causing the exceedance at the Hidden Valley monitor, as opposed to more regional secondary sources of PM10. These precursor pollutants, when they form more on a regional level as opposed to very localized around one particular monitor. And then lastly, we also took a look at areas where secondary particulates are known to contribute to PM10 exceedances, and we looked at San Joaquin Valley, California. They have much higher PM2.5, PM10 ratios than those seen in West Pinal County. So you can see if you look at the 2 monitors, one in Fresno and one in Bakersfield, they're nearly double what exists at the Casa Grande and Hidden Valley monitor. So this indicates that when those secondary particulates form, they form in that fine fraction of PM10, PM2.5 and less, and that's what makes those ratios higher. So this is one piece of evidence that these precursor pollutants don't really contribute to exceedances in the West Pinal County nonattainment area. Next slide, please. We also looked at chemical characterization of the PM10 data. So a study back in 2009 through 2010 analyzed air samples for the chemical contributions to both the fine and the coarse fraction of PM10. An analysis of that air sampling data found that precursor pollutants did not create secondary particulate matter concentrations above the EPA concentration thresholds of 1.5 micrograms for PM2.5 and 5 micrograms for PM10 on exceedance days. So we looked at the concentrations of nitrates and sulfates and ammonium. We looked at those. What did the chemical concentrations indicate? And they were all below those EPA thresholds on the exceedance days in 2009 and 2010. Similarly, when we looked at the secondary organic carbon concentrations that were recorded by these air samplers, they did not exceed the EPA thresholds. So that indicates that VOCs do not contribute significantly to PM10 exceedances. Next slide, please. The last piece of data that we looked at is we followed EPA guidance. So EPA guidance exists for a precursor demonstration for PM2.5. Specific guidance does not exist for PM10. So, but we wanted to at least follow the guidance for 2.5 and see what it showed. So following that guidance, photochemical modeling was performed using the CAMX model and the 2017 National Emissions Inventory for Pinal County to determine the impact of precursors on the formation of PM2.5 in that nonattainment area. So the modeling established that all 4 precursor pollutants, again, were found to be insignificant to the formation of PM2.5. Again, the modeling found that all 4 precursors, so ammonia, nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxide, and VOCs were all below the significant threshold of 1.5 micrograms. So given that the vast majority of secondary particulate formation occurs in that fine fraction of PM10, PM2.5 or less, it is really highly unlikely that secondary particulate formation would be insignificant for PM2.5, but significant for PM10. Another way of saying that is it's really unlikely that the formation of secondary particles would occur in the coarse fraction, the bigger size particles, but not occur at a significant level in that small PM2.5 fraction. Next slide, please. So these 3 pieces of evidence demonstrate that precursor pollutants do not significantly contribute to PM10 exceedances in the West Pinal County nonattainment area. And so, since these precursor pollutants have been found to be insignificant, control of these precursor emissions is not required and would not expedite attainment of the PM10 standard in the West Pinal County nonattainment area. Next slide. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Matt. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you, Matt. We'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is the Maricopa County Ozone Campaign and Mowing Down Pollution Program. And Tina Wazlowski from Maricopa County Air Quality will give that presentation to us.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for letting me present today to the group. We're very excited. We're launching our, just at the very beginning stages of launching our 2021 ozone campaign. Unfortunately, we were not able to launch the campaign last spring, summer, because we were asked from a downtown county's communication perspective to limit that type of thing so that the county could focus on the COVID messaging. And so that is still the case in large part, but we are launching the campaign. So we are very excited. We're at the very beginning stages. And so happy to talk to you all folks about some of the things that we have in store and some of the things we hope that you could help us with. And if you attended our Clean Air Council meeting yesterday, you're going to have the same presentation because we like to not waste our time in creating new content. And so we like to share that information. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. So as most of you know, our ozone campaign, it's one of 2 major campaigns that we have every year. We have our Burn Cleaner, Burn Better, which is our wintertime smoke campaign in the winter months. And we did have that campaign as well. That's a really condensed one. It's about 2 to 3 weeks long. Our ozone campaign is pretty long, right? So we start seeing ground level ozone increasing from April through the end of September. So this one is a pretty long campaign. So this year, some of our plans are some TV buys. And that was an interesting thing when we conducted an end of campaign survey for Burn Cleaner, Burn Better just a few months ago. And it turns out that the radio buys that we purchased did not get as much traction with public viewing as did the TV. So this time around, we're focused on TV buys. So we have 3, 5, 12, and Univision. And so we have a mix of sort of traditional broadcast TV along with streaming services, some other social media banners and ads, items like that. For Channel 12, it's exciting because they have quite a few anticipated impressions due to covering the Olympics this summer. And then also for our Univision buy, we have some radio along with that. So we were able to get that piece of it as well in that platform. Excuse me. Some of the other things we're looking at is a light rail wrap. So thank you to our contacts at Valley Metro, and they helped us out with that. We did issue a press release on Monday, so that is already out. Looking at partnering with other folks like the City of Phoenix with their water bill. I believe we're going to have an article in the July water bill with those folks, and also Valley Metro newsletter, so getting our word out that way. Our webpage and online toolkit, which I'll review in just a moment. And then of course, ADOT signage when we do inevitably going to experience those high pollution advisory days. And then virtual presentations like this and the one we gave yesterday. And then we'll also have our end of campaign survey, of course, which won't take place until the September, October timeframe. We'll go to the next slide. So new this year, so I'm sure many of you, I know a lot of you folks have been around and working with us for many years. So you're familiar with our campaign, the Commit to One Day campaign. And so we added a new tip, which is promote remote. So you obviously see Gusty Breeze. He's at home there with his teeny tiny cup of coffee, and just including in another tip of course, all of the benefits that we've been able to realize, and most of you all too, in the last year and several months here, which of course is teleworking. So we've added that piece to our campaign. We'll go to the next slide. It's just a view of the light rail wrap. So that will be installed sometime in June. So you'll be able to see that around town if you work or live down in that area where the light rail passes by. We'll go to the next slide. This is our online toolkit. So this is where we have all of our updated information. I know in the past you all have been so great at helping to share information. We really appreciate it. We have written materials, newsletter articles that are just cut and pastable. That's a word. We have all of our video and audio PSAs that are there. So you'll be seeing some of those commercials on TV. Any of our updated flyers or brochures, any social media graphics are there and available for y'all to use. And then the website widget, which is available to be placed, of course, on your website, which shows our air quality information. And you can see there, the toolkit is available at that link there. And so hopefully you all can go on and check it out. Certainly if you have any questions, we're always available to help with anything you might need, something that might be missing. We're happy to get that produced. And I think in the interest of time, we'll just go to the next slide. So how can you help? Helping to share our social media posts. Social media, we're really ramping that up. We're not only using sort of those organic platforms. So we've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then also we use Nextdoor, but we'll be doing some boosting as well. So certainly, I know that a lot of times we'll also share messages and tag some of our partners. So we certainly would appreciate that as well. Sending out social media posts from your own platforms, spreading the word at your local meetings. And again, we're happy to come if you feel it's appropriate to conduct virtual presentations. We would love to do that. Any newsletter articles that you might have with your associations, internal awareness, sending employee emails with that information. And then of course, our standard commit to one day that you see all over our materials. We'll go to the next slide. So I was also asked just to touch briefly on one of our programs, and we conduct this program in partnership with the Department of Environmental Quality. So we thank our friends at ADEQ for help with this program, and it is called our Mowing Down Pollution Program. It is an ongoing program. In fact, it actually started as a seasonal program, and we just decided to keep it all year round because I don't know about you, but we mow our lawn here at my house all year round. So it is the lawn and garden device replacement program, and many of you probably have heard of it before, but just a couple reminders. So this one, you do have to turn in your device. So it's taking a gas-powered lawnmower or other kind of garden device like trimmers or leaf blower or chainsaw, gas-powered chainsaw, and you turn it in to one of our facilities. And when you turn it in, you then receive a voucher for either $150 off or $50 off the purchase of a lawnmower or garden device at one of our participating Home Depots. And we have 9 locations across the valley. And just as of last week to date, from the beginning of the program, which was in 2018, we have turned over almost 1,600 lawnmowers and not as many handhelds because that portion did come a little bit later in the program. So we have about 123 handhelds. And if we go to the next slide. So this is just a little snippet. Every year our department produces our annual report, and this is just a little snippet out of the annual report. Now, you can kind of see some of the data there and some of the pollution prevented. This only runs through the fiscal year. So you'll see those numbers are a little bit different. You can see just about all of the CO and VOC pollution prevented tons by fiscal year. And you can see that information there. So we're really happy about this program. We'd love to see it increase. We're going to be using our social media to its full advantage and really trying to ramp up getting these gas-powered lawnmowers and devices out of our garages and into battery and electric powered. So we're really excited about that. And I think we go to the next slide. That is all I had. Is very short, brief, and I appreciate everybody for letting me come on and talk about our ozone campaign.
Thank you very much, Tina. Are there any questions? All right, well, you've got the contact information there. If you need to reach out, please do so. And we'll move on to, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 7 at this time. And that's the MAG Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee Vice Chair vacancy, letters of interest, and Lindy Bauer will give us an update on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. As we mentioned last time too, we have a vacancy for a vice chair position for the Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee. The chair and the vice chair appointments are for 2 years and they expire on June 30th, 2021. So Megan Sheldon's been kind enough to be interested in ascending to the chair. And so we are looking for a new vice chair. According to our policy procedures for committees, the vice chair will need to be from a MAG member agency. Letters of interest are due by May 3rd. And we are very grateful for the leadership of this committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lindy. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, the request for future agenda items. Topics or issues of interest for the advisory committee for future meetings. Our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for May 27th, 2021. Are there any requests by membership for an item or on the future agenda at this time? All right, hearing none. Again, if there are, please reach out to us. And our last item is agenda item number 9, which is adjournment of our meeting. The business for this meeting is now concluded. Thank you very much for attending and have a great rest of your afternoon.